If you would, go ahead and open up your Bibles to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I'm going to try my best to speak clearly. On Friday, I had oral surgery. So I had just some kind of receding gums up here, and they had to cut up at the roof of my mouth and stitch up here. So I have stitches all across this side of the top of my mouth and up on top of the roof of my mouth. So there won't be a lot of loud preaching this morning, so it'll be nice and soft. Thank you. I don't know about y'all, but I'm not a big sitcom watcher. I don't really keep up with a lot of the sitcoms that are out there now. One of my all-time favorite sitcoms that I don't know if it will ever be beat, at least for me, is the show Seinfeld. Is there any Seinfeld fans out here at all? I didn't really watch Seinfeld when it was actually coming out live, or when the new episodes were coming out in the 90s. I started watching it sometime after the show had already gone off air because the reruns are on all the time. So I just love this show. I've seen probably every episode multiple times. It's just hilarious. But I found out a little over a year ago that Jerry Seinfeld was actually coming to town. And I found out at the last minute that he was coming to the Performing Arts Center to do a stand-up comedy bit. And so me and a friend got together and went and saw it. And it was just a hilarious show. I don't know if any of y'all have ever been to stand-up comedy shows before, but you see some of these actors, some of these famous comedians, they get in there, they have their stand-up bit, and it's just like vulgar and nasty and all this stuff. And so I went and saw Jerry Seinfeld, and it was just this great show. It was actually pretty clean, like his humor. He's kind of that situational humor type guy, and he just kind of makes light of stuff that pretty much every one of us go through. And so as I was watching Jerry Seinfeld perform, as kind of an aspiring speaker, I was really amazed at how he spoke for about an hour and 15 minutes, and I was literally with him the entire time he was speaking. And for any of you who have ever spoken in front of an audience, keeping people's attention, I try to keep y'all's attention for like 25 minutes. But the fact that this guy had my attention and the audience engaged and laughing for an hour and 15 minutes was just amazing to me at how good this guy was at his craft. And he would have one bit, he would tell like a joke about something. I remember he talked about coffee shops and stuff. But what he would do is he'd have one bit on one subject, and then he would end the bit on another subject and immediately tie that into his next bit. So it was like you're kind of analyzing him a little bit, which I kind of was. He would finish one bit and just amazingly just tie it right into the next. And it was just like this cycle of just jokes that just went on, and I was just really amazed at how good he was and gifted he was at what he was doing. And I was preparing for this message this week, and I was kind of thinking back over this a little bit. I was kind of wondering myself, why would he still do this? Why would Jerry Seinfeld still do stand-up comedy? He already did that when he was younger. That's kind of how he got started. And then he kind of worked his way onto TV and had the successful show. The man has all the fame he's ever going to get. He has all the money he's ever going to get. So why in the world would he still go back to doing stand-up comedy? He obviously doesn't need the money at this point in his career. And I don't really know, I haven't heard him in interviews say this, but I can imagine the reason he does this is because he loves to do it. He loves to make people laugh. He probably loves just sitting down preparing these kind of funny ideas and stuff. But I can imagine that the reason he even still does this is because he absolutely loves to do it. And we all have things in our lives that we love to do. But sometimes in our life, it's easy as time goes on to get knocked astray of our first love. It's easy to get life can take us down a different path, but sometimes we need to get back to that first love in our lives, which is to be God. And this chapter in 1 Corinthians talks about love. It's an entire chapter on agape love, which agape love is basically a love for God and a love for other people, which when you love God, a natural outflow of your love for God will turn into other people, or turn into a love for other people. And we need to be careful and guard our hearts in this pursuit of love, because it's so easy to get knocked astray in this journey of life sometimes and forget our first love and our first devotion, which should always be to God. I know there was a church that I spoke at a while ago. It was a smaller church, And I don't really know the details of what was going on in this church, but there was it was almost like this Hatfields and McCoys type of divide. I mean, you got like, this church is down to about 15 or so people, and I have no idea what happened. But somewhere along the way, some division came up, and you had two sides going against one another. And I kind of thought about it. I don't really know the history of this church, but I know it was an older church, and I kind of thought back to how this church probably started with maybe one or a group of individuals that just really wanted to make a difference in their community for Christ. They probably took a step of faith, and they took that step of faith when they bought the building for the first time and purchased the land for the church. And there's all these, probably, I imagine they had a lot of excitement as they got started. But what happened along their journey as a church, one thing led to another. Maybe pastors came and went, and pastors did some things they shouldn't have done and caused some problems in the church. And one thing led to another, and here you had this church about a year or so ago was just two sides, one side against the other, over, I can only imagine what they were fighting about, and honestly, I didn't even want to know or get involved in this type of thing. But that's what things like that can happen in our families, in our workplaces, amongst our friendships, when we forget to focus on God and have our love rooted in Him. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Everything that happens in our life flows from what's inside of us. And we need to be careful that we're walking in this love that this chapter talks about. So we're going to be talking out of 1 Corinthians 13 this morning, and I'm trying not to lisp as I speak because I have stitches all up in the roof of my mouth and everything. We're going to be talking out of verses 1 and 2 this morning on how we can improve in certain areas of our life and be more loving as people, more loving as family members, but more loving as friends, and as we become what God has called us to be. It says this in verse 1, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. And the first thing we can learn from this passage in verse 1 is that our words, the things that come out of our mouths, need to be motivated by love. Notice what it's saying. If I speak in the tongues of men or the tongues of angels, and it's talking about, there's some theological disagreement about this type of stuff. Some people say you can actually speak in an angelic tongue when you're in kind of a prayer language. Other people say that this verse is referring to at the time of Pentecost when the Spirit of God came down, they actually spoke in known human languages, and they were able to speak in language they had not yet learned. So there's a little bit of kind of debate back and forth over what this is actually referring to, but we're not going to really get into that this morning. One thing I really want us to focus on this morning is how no matter what comes out of our mouth, whether we're speaking to a friend, a family member, a coworker, or wherever we're at in life, the words that come out of our mouth need to be rooted and motivated by love. Proverbs 18:21 says that the tongue has the power of life and death. In other words, the words that come out of our mouths, especially towards other people, they can lift them up, they can build them up, they can encourage them, they can breathe spiritual life into other people. Or the words that we speak could also cause death. They could cause discouragement. They could belittle other people. They could just really cut someone else down. The power of our words is tremendous. We could have a tremendous effect on the life of other people based on what comes out of our mouth. I know when I was younger growing up, I talk a lot about stuff I did when I was younger or when I was a kid, and some of y'all probably think I'm just this horrible person as I share just candidly about stuff that went on when I was younger. But I remember when I was in middle school, I wasn't a bad kid. I was kind of just a little bit of a punk, I guess. A little bit of a punk. We all probably were in some way, shape, or form growing up. And let's just say I wasn't always nice to other people sometimes. And I would say mean things to people sometimes. And there was actually one person that I was actually said some things to that were mean. And it turns out, it's just kind of something I'd done before. And people have been mean to me. And, just kind of how life goes on sometimes when you're in middle school. But apparently the words I said to this person actually stuck with this person for a little while. And later on in life, even years later, this person didn't really like me because due to some things I had said and did to her just in middle school. And I ended up apologizing to her later on in life. I mean, like 8 years or so. I was like 21. I ran into her, and I knew she didn't really think highly of me because of some things I said. So I actually was able to apologize to her. And I don't think I've seen her since. But, the fact that I was able to apologize to her kind of helped things out a little bit. But the thing that really kind of bothers me is the fact that I said some mean things to this person ended up causing some problems in her life. I mean, this girl didn't dislike me for no reason. This girl disliked me because I had said some things that kind of struck her at the core a little bit and been hurtful toward her. And it just really kind of bothers me a little bit now that I'm older that I said some things that probably maybe caused her to have some, low self-esteem, caused her to be discouraged and upset. And just, now that I'm older, I just kind of realize, I shouldn't have said a lot of the things that I said. And we all have things that we probably wish we could take back, some things that maybe we said to individuals along the way in our life that we wish we could take back. But we really need to be careful to guard what comes out of our mouths, because I know in this particular instance, my words spoke death into this person's life. My words spoke negative things into this person's life. And we just need to be really careful and guard our hearts and guard what comes out of our mouths toward other people. And I know just about a month or two ago, I'm kind of with my friends. I don't know if, as I get to know you all a little bit better, maybe you see this kind of coming out a little bit. I'm kind of a little bit of a jokester. I'm kind of sarcastic, dry-witted. And, when I'm with my friends and stuff, I joke around and cut up a good bit. And I noticed about a month or so ago, I was with one of my buddies, and I was just kind of cutting up a little bit, just trying to get a laugh. I mean, I didn't have, malintentious motive. I didn't want to really cut anybody down. But what happened is I was kind of telling a little bit of a joke, and I threw in the names of two people we knew, and just kind of, it wasn't like a mean-spirited type thing. It was kind of like, hey, I want to get a couple laughs. But really what I kind of realized, I was kind of throwing some people under the bus a little bit. Just trying to be funny and cute, and I kind of said some things just in a kind of a joking way, not really in a mean kind of way, but I kind of realized that it wasn't the best thing for me to kind of joke about these other people. And it's always fun when you're doing something you shouldn't do, that there's sometime a Bible verse will come to your head. And this verse came to my mind. It's actually Matthew 12:36. It's a verse that Jesus said that kind of, I just came to my mind as I was kind of cutting up and joking around. And this is what Jesus says. He says, "But I tell you that men will have to give account on the day of judgment for every careless word they have spoken." Here I was being very careless with my sense of humor a little bit. And this wasn't something I did in front of these people. It was just me and a buddy. So it didn't do any harm to these other individuals. But I realized I was being very careless with what was coming out of my mouth. And I was just kind of joking and just trying to be cute. But it came out in a way, and I realized that God didn't want me to be kind of cutting up in that way. But James 3:8 says this. No matter how hard we try, we are to try. We all need to improve in how we speak to other people. But James 3:8 says this. It says, "But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison." No matter how hard we try, though, we are to keep trying to improve in how we use our tongue. Ultimately, this verse is saying we all fail in how we use our words sometimes. We all say things we shouldn't say. We all say things in a way we shouldn't say them. Sometimes that's even bigger than the words that actually come out of our mouths. But we need to strive for that perfection. Even if we can't get to that perfection, we need to strive to improve in how we speak to other people. Because our words, if we use them right, they can really breathe life into other people. I know a couple of years ago, for those of you who don't know, I was a missionary in Argentina. And I had gone through this time in my life where I believed God had called me into ministry. But then, as time went on, I didn't kind of really see things happening in the natural, at least the way I was hoping they would. And I kind of got discouraged. And I went through this time where I was kind of discouraged and kind of just kind of wondering whether or not God ever wanted me to be a preacher or pastor. And so here I was a missionary in Argentina. And I got invited, about probably the first month or so I was actually there, I got invited to give like a testimony at this church we were at. We would travel around and visit different churches and stuff. And so I actually got invited to give like a 10-minute testimony at this church. And I guess I gave my testimony a little bit, but I'll be honest, I just flat out preached it to this congregation. There was actually an interpreter with me. My Spanish was a little splotchy at the time, and this guy, if I got like emphatic, he was over next to me getting emphatic and everything. I just was like, man, I'm going to preach. Forget this testimony thing. So I got up there, I spoke for about 15 minutes or so, and the people applauded, and I could just tell that God really encouraged some of the people that were there. But the next day, this Brazilian woman who was with us came up to me, and it's funny because she's speaking Spanish to me. And, I was the new guy. I was there for like a month, so my Spanish was just a little weak. And so I remember her coming up to me, like standing in front of me and speaking in like really slow Spanish to make sure I understood it. I can't remember everything she said to me, but she basically said, you have a spiritual gift, and just like, like you got a calling on your life, and God is going to use you. I mean, she just spoke these words of encouragement and basically just came up to me and just went out of her way to bless my life. And if I'm honest, at the time that she did this, I was desperately in need of words like that. It's not something you really want to admit. We all don't really want to admit weaknesses at times. But here I was kind of this discouraged, down and out, nothing's happening. Am I really called into ministry? And then this girl goes out of her way to just encourage the gifts that she saw that I had. And that really went a long way in my life as far as helping me get back on track to what God had called me to do. And a couple weeks ago, another word of encouragement I got. I just went to my office after church, and there was like a little basket there of cards and notes that the kids had all put together for me. I don't know, I guess Barbara or someone had them put together these notes for me. They're all these like really positive, nice, encouraging things like, we love you, Pastor Blair. And there's one card right here, if you can see it. If you see on the inside, it's got an acronym. It's got BLAIR, and it's got a little acronym by it. And these are just little things, but honestly, these little things kind of blessed me a little bit, and I wanted to share with you a little bit what a girl in the church wrote for me. And this is my name here. This is Blair. This is the acronym for Blair that she wrote. B is best pastor in the world. L is loves us. No, that's not technically true sometimes. A is appreciate, though it's spelled wrong. I is I love you. And R for Blair is really good at preaching. That may not be much, but I'm going to take that. If I get something like that, even if it's a small thing, there's little positive words that even a kid could put together can really go a long way. And, I keep these. I have all the notes right there next to my desk in the office. And you know what? If I'm ever down and out, I'm going to read those little notes. And I'm going to take anything I can get. So the words we have, even little words like that, even little cute little acronyms about your name, can go a long way, especially in this life, that can be hard sometimes. And, one of my goals here on Sunday morning is to, I realize as a preacher and a speaker, the words that I say on Sunday morning can really go a long way at times. And I've actually been under preaching before, even like biblical preaching sometimes, the way it's presented sometimes. I've been under preachers before where I felt like it came across in like a condescending type way. I've been in even strong churches before where I'd sit there and hear the pastor speak, and honestly, I would leave church like feeling worse than I felt before I went. And I don't know if any of y'all have ever experienced that before, but one of the things I kind of aim for is I want people to be uplifted when they come here on Sunday mornings. I'm going to do my best. I may fail from time to time, and you may daydream during some of my messages, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I want you to leave here lifted up, because I know how difficult the problems that life can bring us are going to be at times, and I want you to go out there with at least 1 hour a week where you're getting lifted up through the preaching, through the music, and so that's kind of one of my goals as I'm here just speaking to you each Sunday morning, because I realize just how far our words can go and how far even my words can go sometimes. It's just, even if it's just something that comes up on a Wednesday or something several days later, I truly believe if you're going through something, God will bring to mind maybe something I have said from time to time, or a verse that I spoke on, and God will bring you to remembrance those things. And the same is true with music. Sometimes in music, you'll go out through the week and you'll remember a song that was sung the Sunday before, and you'll start singing it in your heart and stuff like that. So these things are important, and that's kind of one of my goals that I wanted to share with you, is that you would be uplifted on Sundays when you come here. Second thing we can learn from this passage in verse 2 is that our gifts and talents need to be rooted in love. Notice what verse 2 says. It says, if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. In other words, if you're the most talented person in the world, you have all the knowledge in the world, you can fathom all mysteries, you have this great gifts and everything. If those things are not rooted in love, this verse says that you have nothing. And I kind of thought about, there's a televangelist during the 80s. You probably will figure out, some of you might figure out who I'm talking about, but I don't want to throw anybody under the bus or rehash what they've already moved on from in their life. But there was a televangelist in the 80s that had some issues arise in his ministry. And this man and his wife actually started off kind of small time. And the one thing, at least for me, at least from my perspective, the one thing I believe about most all the people you see, most all Christian leaders you see on TV, I truly believe that most all of them started off with good motives. I can't imagine in my wildest dreams someone saying, you know what, I'm going to go into ministry to manipulate people and make money or to, do whatever kind of other things to get power. Most people in their right mind wouldn't even concoct such an idea. So this man and his wife started off with a small TV show for youth. It was like a youth programming thing. And they were just really gifted, charismatic people, great stage presence, great on TV, did a great job presenting, biblical teachings to youth. And next thing you know, they ended up having their own Christian TV show. And I actually read at the height of its popularity, it had 12 million regular viewers, which I don't know much about Christian TV, but I know that's a lot of people watching a Christian TV show when you got 12 million viewers. But what happened is somewhere along his journey, his heart began to go astray. And he began to get maybe a little greedy for money. He noticed that if he asked for money, he probably got X amount of dollars in and stuff. And he kind of realized the power that he had to kind of get money and start making wealth off of this ministry. And these things, I can imagine in his life, I can imagine it probably started small, because oftentimes these bigger things we fall into always start off with a smaller compromise. And I can imagine that maybe somewhere along the way that they kind of skimmed a little money off the top, so to speak. And next thing you know, they started skimming a little bit more and getting a little bit more and more greedy. But what ended up happening in his ministry is they ended up fraudulently selling $1,000 lifetime partnerships in their ministry. And basically it was, if you pay $1,000 or donate $1,000, you become a lifetime partner in their ministry. And that actually included a 3-day stay at a luxury hotel. And they actually didn't end up following through with that promise. So here they were asking people for $1,000 to be a lifetime partner, and you get this three-day weekend in this luxury hotel to be a lifetime partner in our ministry. And it turns out they didn't fulfill their obligations to those that donated. And this big old mess came out of it. And there was accusations of sexual impropriety, and just all this stuff just started to come to the forefront of his life. And this guy actually ended up spending 5 years in prison for this. And his ministry just collapsed hard and publicly. But as I was kind of thinking about this story a little bit, I kind of realized this guy, somewhere along the way, strayed from his first love. He started off with a genuine love for God, but other things got involved and started to kind of knock him off course a little bit. We need to be careful. We all have gifts and talents and abilities. We all have something or 2 or 3 things that we're really good at. But sometimes we can get a little excessive praise, or sometimes our motives can get knocked off course, and we can start doing those things for the wrong reasons. Ephesians 6:7 says, "Serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord and not men." So whatever gifts and talents you have, whether you use them at your job or wherever it is that you use the gifts that God has given you, we need to serve wholeheartedly and guard our hearts and make sure our motives for serving are good and pure. I know about a while ago, I was kind of in charge of this ministry, or this piece of a ministry, as kind of like the overseer of it, and I had to organize a lot of volunteers and everything. And there's this girl that helped out. She was very what she did for us, she was very good at it. She's probably better than most of the other people. So it's just something she was good at. And somehow or another, this person started to get like this self-entitled attitude about it. Like If I don't show up, y'all aren't going to make it without me. And that's kind of how this person started to think a little bit. And she just had developed this really negative attitude about things and became really unpleasant to serve with. And sometimes what will happen is when we get a little bit too much praise about something we're good at, we can start kind of getting this little self-entitled attitude about us. But we need to be sure that we use our time and our talents and our gifts in a wholehearted manner. And I know one of the best examples I saw this morning is actually, I ran into Jane and Samantha and Adrian and Amanda, some other people in the church, and they're just, if you talk to these ladies, they're just stoked about this fall festival we have coming up on Saturday. And what happened is apparently there was another organization that was supposed to throw kind of this event yesterday, and that actually got rained out. So what they did is they donated tons of supplies for our thing next week, and tons of food, tons of toys, tons of candy. They actually donated 2 new bikes. And just to see these women and their reaction, just this morning as I came in, they were just like stoked. I mean, they were like, they just drinking a Red Bull, they're ready to go. That's just a classic example of just having just a great attitude. That's the kind of attitude, and I know I'm not trying to leave anybody out, but that's really the kind of positive, uplifting, excited attitude we need to have as a church and what we do together. And the same can apply at our work and our jobs. Sometimes people will treat us unfairly, and we still need to come back with that positive, uplifting attitude as we pursue God's best for our lives. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you this morning. I truly believe as a church whole, I've only been here a short time, but one thing I know is this church is very loving church. This church is a very service-oriented church, and people here get excited. When we got something to do, there's, I don't have to ask twice. Hey, can we do this? And some of them, yeah, and then they come out and do it like 50 times better than what I thought they were going to do. And so, I want us to continue in that vein, to have that loving attitude in all we do. And we're going to be kind of going into this further into this love chapter as we move forward in the coming weeks. So let's pray this morning. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for everyone in this church and just all the loving people and all the encouraging, positive spirit that you've put inside of each and every one of us. And I just pray that we would continue in that vein and that I would foster that kind of attitude when I speak on Sunday mornings and when I interact with other people. And I just pray that you would continue to grow us in that heart to serve. We already have just collectively as a church, we have this heart to serve and do great things for you. And I just pray that you would continue to guide us and that we would just give of our time and talents and gifts even more and more and just fill our hearts with more and more love each and every day. And I just pray that you would guide our words sometimes, Lord. Sometimes we fail in how we talk to our family members. Sometimes we fail in how we talk to our co-workers and our friends. And sometimes our words that we use aren't always the best. And I just pray that you would help us, each and every one of us, to improve in how we use our tongues, and that we would use our tongues and our words to breathe life into other people. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.